In the quiet valleys of Montana, a forgotten war hero lived with only his loyal German shepherd by his side. He had no medals on his walls, no trophies on his shelves, only envelopes of love sent to children he had rescued from poverty. When cancer struck, he believed his journey was ending. No money, no family left. Just a man preparing to say goodbye. Yet God had already written a different chapter. One knock at the door changed everything, then another and another. Every child he once saved returned as a grown hero, carrying hope, faith, and the proof that kindness never dies. As life slipped through his fingers, a miracle stood guard. A loyal dog refusing to leave his side, and a community rising like angels in human form. If you believe that God still sends miracles through the hearts of ordinary people, do not scroll away. Hit subscribe, share this story, and comment Amen to spread faith, hope, and God's endless love. May the Lord bless and protect every soul watching this video. Bozeman, a small town nestled in the wide valleys of Montana, lay quiet under the weight of another brutal winter night. The kind where the cold sliced like a sharpened blade and the wind screamed down from the mountains as if it carried the anger of the sky itself, rattling windows and kicking up spirals of white powder that erased every track left by the living. Snow-covered pines leaned heavily toward a lonely cabin made of dark, weathered wood, its roof glittering with icicles that looked sharp enough to pierce through steel. Inside that little cabin, warm light flickered from a modest fireplace, and the smell of burning pine wood layered a sense of comfort over the harshness outside. Jack Turner, a 68-year-old veteran with a rugged face carved by years of service and sacrifice, sat in his old rocking chair, hands rough and scarred, gripping the wooden arms as he breathed slowly through a chest that had known both explosions and heartbreak. His strong build had softened with age, but he still carried the sturdy presence of a soldier. Short, gray hair brushed neatly, a trimmed beard tracing his jawline that once commanded respect from fellow Marines in battlefields far away from this snow-drowned silence. Jack wore a flannel shirt faded from countless washings and a pair of old jeans patched at the knee because he never spent money on himself, not when others needed help more. At his feet lay Rex, a 4-year-old German shepherd with thick sable fur, alert amber eyes, and a powerful, loyal spirit that never left Jack's side. Rex had been trained in K-9 rescue work before an injury pushed him out of the program, which made him a perfect companion for a man who also carried invisible wounds. The two of them had found each other through fate rather than fortune, living each day with a silent promise that neither would be alone again. Jack's life was simple. He chopped wood, took long walks in the forest with Rex, volunteered at the local community center when he could, and every month he mailed most of his small veteran pension to organizations supporting underprivileged children across the country. Children he would never meet, but whom he believed deserved a chance he never had. His heart had always been bigger than his wallet, and he found joy in knowing that somewhere, a kid could stay in school because he skipped buying a new jacket or a better chair. He carried the weight of guilt from the war, memories of young faces he could not save, and giving back to children was his way of rewriting the past in small miracles. Despite his strength, Jack had been feeling a sharp pain in his abdomen for weeks, a stubborn ache that refused to be ignored. He had brushed it aside, claiming age and stubborn bones, but on a particularly cold morning when he doubled over in agony and Rex barked frantically, nudging him toward the truck, Jack finally agreed to drive into town. The local hospital was a modest building coated in white tile and the sterile scent of disinfectant. Jack sat in the exam room under the harsh fluorescent lights, His jaw clenched, not because he was afraid of pain, but because he feared becoming a burden. Dr. Olivia Sanders, a 45-year-old physician with warm brown eyes, curly dark hair pulled back in a tight bun, and a no-nonsense attitude carved from 18 years of medical experience, entered holding the results of his tests. She had a kind face, but it stiffened as she read through the paper one final time. She explained in a steady voice that Jack had pancreatic cancer, a particularly aggressive one, but they had caught it early enough that treatment offered hope. She emphasized urgency, speaking of chemotherapy and specialized procedures that required financial support. Jack listened quietly while Rex sat pressed against his leg, sensing the tension in the room. He nodded politely, thanked her for the information, then walked out with a calm smile on his face that did not reach his tired eyes. Back home, Jack fed Rex dinner as usual, patting the dog's head as he whispered that everything would be fine. He sat by the fire again, his mind wandering to the number of children he could still help if he did not waste money on hospitals and bills. The thought of spending his savings on himself felt wrong, selfish even. He believed that life had already given him more years than many of his comrades. If this was the end of his road, then he would face it with dignity and gratitude for the moments he had been granted. Later that evening, his old rotary phone rang. The only person who ever called him was Michael Davis, his best friend since their days in uniform. Michael was 67 now, tall and still broad-shouldered, with salt and pepper hair and sharp blue eyes that once scanned enemy lines and now scanned the world for ways to help others. He had always been more outspoken than Jack, with a raspy voice shaped by too many battlefield cigarettes. He heard the unusual quiet in Jack's tone and pressed him for the truth, refusing to accept vague assurances. With a heavy sigh, Jack confessed his diagnosis. Michael's reaction was immediate: anger, fear, disbelief, and a fierce loyalty that roared through the phone line. He demanded to come right away, to help, to fight this battle with him. Jack tried to calm him, telling him he had already made peace with whatever would happen. Michael knew Jack better than anyone. He recognized the resignation in his friend's voice, and it terrified him far more than the disease did. When the call ended, Jack stared into the flames, feeling Rex place his muzzle on Jack's knee, the dog's warm breath grounding him back to the present. Snow kept tapping at the windows, each gust of wind reminding him that time was slipping away. Yet he smiled softly, believing his life had been meaningful, that the good he had tried to do would outlive him through the children he had helped. The fire crackled. Rex sighed deeply and curled closer, and Jack closed his eyes, deciding not to tell anyone else. Only Michael would know, and that was enough. If death was coming, Jack was prepared to greet it like an old acquaintance, with no regret except leaving Rex behind. Michael Davis stood rigidly in his living room the morning after Jack's call, his breath shallow, his thoughts racing like a man who had just heard his closest brother was being dragged back into war. He grabbed his old leather jacket, the same one he wore on their final deployment, and stormed out of the house with determination burning behind his sharp blue eyes. He drove through the snow-lined streets toward a small non-profit office in downtown Bozeman, a place he knew Jack had been donating to for years. The building looked unremarkable from the outside, a faded brick structure with a flickering neon sign that read, "Hope Path Organization." But the moment Michael stepped inside, warmth and laughter hit him like a wave. A young receptionist, Melissa Carter, greeted him with a polite smile. She was in her late 20s, petite with soft blonde hair tied into a ponytail, fair skin, and round glasses that made her look gentle and bookish. Her voice carried kindness, though she seemed surprised to see a tall, broad-shouldered older man rushing in with urgency in his stride. After Michael explained that he was looking for information about a donor named Jack Turner, Melissa's expression shifted to admiration, and she led him down a short hallway to a room filled with children's drawings pinned on the walls, each one colored with gratitude and innocence. There he met the director, Samuel Green, a black man in his early 40s, dressed in a well-pressed navy suit that contrasted with the simple surroundings. Samuel carried himself with quiet confidence, his neatly trimmed beard and deep brown eyes radiating sincerity and strength. A noticeable scar on his left hand suggested he had faced life's difficulties long before reaching this leadership position. When Samuel learned that Jack was ill, a shadow of sorrow passed across his face. He insisted they sit, then opened a file drawer and pulled out a thick folder filled with handwritten letters, photos, progress reports, and thank you cards. Every page held evidence of Jack's decades of silent charity. Samuel explained that Jack was not just a donor, but the organization's lifeline. The person who always stepped in when a child faced the threat of dropping out or going hungry. He flipped to a picture of a young woman smiling brightly in a graduation gown. Her name was Emily Reyes, once a shy girl with long dark hair, tan skin, and deep brown eyes that used to be filled with fear because of the abusive household she lived in. Jack had paid for her counseling, legal support, and school tuition. Now she worked as a social worker in Portland, dedicating her life to protecting children just like she once was. Michael felt his throat tighten as Samuel continued. He showed the record of Daniel Harris, a lanky boy with freckles and messy auburn hair, who had almost been forced to quit school to support his family after his father abandoned them. Jack had sent money every month without fail, allowing Daniel to finish his education. Today, Daniel was a high school math teacher in Wyoming, known for helping troubled kids find stability and purpose. Then came a story that hit Michael hardest. Dr. Marcus Carter, a surgeon now working at Seattle General Hospital, had been a homeless teenager in Chicago before Jack's contributions covered his relocation, housing, and college applications. A photo showed Marcus in scrubs, tall and athletic, with close-cut black hair and a determined jawline. Samuel said Marcus often told colleagues that he owed his life to a man he barely knew. Michael listened to each story with his jaw clenched and fists tightening until his knuckles turned white. He thought he knew Jack better than anyone, yet his friend had been carrying out missions of mercy. Quiet battles fought without medals, without recognition. Michael rose from his seat, his heart split between pride and frustration. "He never told me any of this," he muttered. Samuel placed a hand on his shoulder and simply replied, "That is exactly why he is extraordinary." At that moment, Michael knew there was no universe where he would let Jack face cancer alone. If Jack had spent his life saving others, then it was their turn to save him. He turned toward Melissa and Samuel, asking them for contact information for every person Jack had helped. There was a storm raging outside, snow hammering the windows, yet Michael felt a fire within him stronger than any winter wind. He stepped out of the office into the icy air, Rex waiting patiently at his truck, having accompanied him into town. Rex's ears perked up as Michael approached, and for the first time since the devastating phone call, Michael allowed himself a thin, determined smile. "We're going to fight," he whispered, placing a firm hand on the dog's strong neck. Together, they drove off into the storm to find the people whose lives Jack had changed forever. Snow fell heavier that week, blanketing Montana in a silence so deep it felt like the world was holding its breath. Jack Turner sat near the fireplace, the glow dancing across the deep lines etched on his face. He thought he could keep the news quiet, that only Michael would know, but acts of goodness travel faster than any winter storm. Soon, the first knock came. Rex, the strong 4-year-old German shepherd with alert amber eyes and a sturdy, muscular frame, rushed to the door, tail stiff with curiosity. Jack opened it to find Emily Reyes standing there, the once frightened girl now a confident woman in her late 20s. Her long, dark hair fell over a gray winter coat, and her eyes, once full of fear, now reflected determination. She hugged Jack tightly without asking permission, tears catching in her eyelashes. "You saved my life," she said, her voice trembling. "Now let us save yours." Jack, overwhelmed but still proud, thanked her and insisted that he needed no help. Emily stepped inside anyway, placing a small envelope full of her savings on his table. She would not leave it behind. The next visitor arrived the following day. Daniel Harris, now 26, tall and slim with freckles dusting his fair skin and auburn hair curled under a wool cap, stood awkwardly at Jack's door holding a jar filled with coins and small bills. He had always been shy, a young man who once carried the heavy burden of caring for his family. Jack had helped him graduate when everything seemed impossible. Daniel spoke softly, nervous as if he were still the teenage boy Jack once encouraged. "I teach now," he said proudly. "I try to help kids the way you helped me." Jack placed a gentle hand on his shoulder and praised him, telling him that he was already doing enough. Daniel refused to take back the jar and insisted Rex keep watch over it before heading back into the snow. Later that week, a sleek black SUV pulled into Jack's driveway, gathering a shadow against the bright snow. Out stepped Dr. Marcus Carter, tall and fit, with smooth dark skin and a strong jawline that suggested unwavering confidence. His short black hair was dusted with snowflakes as he approached the door. Marcus had seen death too many times in his profession, but he was not prepared to lose the person who gave him hope when he had none. He knelt right there in the snow beside Rex, patting the dog's sturdy shoulders before standing to face Jack. "I owe you more than my life," Marcus said, his deep voice filled with controlled emotion. He handed Jack a thick envelope and promised he would handle every medical step needed, from consultations to specialists. Jack raised his hands, refusing sharply at first, but Marcus simply placed the envelope on the table beside Emily's and Daniel's contributions. The room was filling with hope Jack never asked for. As the days passed, more knocks echoed through the cabin. A middle-aged woman named Linda Brooks arrived with her teenage daughter. Linda had short chestnut hair, soft brown eyes, and lines around her mouth that showed years of worry. Jack once paid for her daughter's glasses when she could not afford them, allowing the girl to stay in school. Linda held Jack's hand and cried silently as she gave him a basket of homemade food and a small recovery fund collected by neighbors. Then came a young soldier named Ben Carter, no relation to Marcus, with buzz-cut black hair and broad shoulders. Years earlier, Jack had sent a letter that convinced Ben's recruiter to accept him despite a minor disability. Ben now drove hours to bring Jack a military medal replica as a symbol of gratitude. Each arrival added another ember of love to the room. Jack tried to protest repeatedly. "I lived a full life," he insisted, his deep voice steady but eyes betraying vulnerability. "I do not want anyone sacrificing for me." Michael stood behind him each time, arms crossed, refusing to let his friend push people away. "You gave these people a chance," Michael argued, his voice gruff with emotion. "You do not get to decide they cannot save you." Still, Jack wavered until the night Rex changed everything. The dog nudged Jack gently, then began dragging a dusty box from under the bed. Inside lay decades of thank you letters, children's drawings, graduation photos, and newspaper clippings. Rex pushed one paper at a time onto Jack's lap, piling them until Jack's hands shook. The room glowed with memories of lives changed. Emily stepped forward, her voice soft. "These are your victories," she whispered. Daniel nodded, adding, "We are your family." Marcus crossed his arms, his expression fierce. "And we fight for family." Jack looked up at the faces surrounding him, their gratitude shining brighter than any medal he had ever earned. Tears filled his eyes, hot and sudden, shocking him after years of holding everything inside. He pulled Rex close, burying his face into the dog's soft fur as his shoulders trembled. For the first time in decades, Jack cried. When he lifted his head, he managed a frail smile. "All right," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "I will fight, if you fight with me." Cheers erupted in the tiny cabin. Michael clapped Jack's back, Rex barked proudly, and hope roared louder than the winter wind outside. Jack Turner's world shifted from the quiet comfort of his cabin to the relentless rhythm of hospital machines. The cancer treatment demanded strength he once reserved for war. Yet this battle struck deeper than bullets ever did. Dr. Marcus Carter oversaw his care personally, arranging a transfer to a larger medical center in Billings. The building stood tall and cold like a fortress of steel and glass, lights glowing through long corridors that smelled of antiseptic and anxiety. Jack arrived leaning on Michael's arm, his once solid frame thinner, his skin pale beneath his gray beard, though the determined spark in his eyes remained. Rex, the loyal German shepherd with sharp ears and powerful strides, stayed close, never more than a few feet from his side, watching each doctor and nurse with protective intensity. The medical staff quickly fell in love with Rex, especially Nurse Sarah Whitmore, a woman in her mid-30s with wavy auburn hair pulled into a practical bun, fair skin dotted lightly with freckles, and kind hazel eyes that softened the sterile environment. She was gentle but firm, moving with the quiet authority of someone who had seen too many families break under fear. Sarah learned Rex's name within minutes, and always bent down to scratch behind his ears, calling him the bravest soldier here, which earned a proud wag of his tail. The first days of treatment crushed Jack's energy. Nausea rippled through his weakened body. His hands shook when he tried to raise a cup of water. Michael stayed at his bedside day and night, his broad shoulders tense, his aging face shadowed with worry. This was the man who once charged through enemy lines without hesitation, yet now feared every beep of the monitor. He tried lifting Jack's spirits with stories from their service days, or teasing jokes about how Rex would soon outrank them both. Jack smiled when he could, but the pain often swallowed any attempt at humor. One night, a brutal winter storm returned like one final test. Jack begged Michael to go home and rest. After arguing and seeing Jack's stubborn resolve, Michael finally agreed, promising to return before sunrise. Rex remained, curling against Jack's legs, warm and watchful. Hours later, Jack felt suffocated by the walls closing in and insisted on stepping outside for a breath of cold air. A nurse tried to stop him, but he assured her he only needed 5 minutes. The freezing wind knifed through his thin hospital gown, yet he felt strangely alive beneath the swirling snowflakes. His legs wobbled as he reached the courtyard, and he collapsed onto the icy ground. Darkness crept in, and he whispered a soft apology meant only for Rex. Rex barked wildly, frantic claws scraping across the frozen walkway. His sharp, loud barks alerted the nearest neighbor of the hospital grounds. Mr. Harold Jenkins, a retired firefighter in his early 70s with a thick white mustache, barrel chest, and weather-beaten skin from decades of running into flames. Jenkins rushed out with a flashlight, found Jack shivering and unconscious, and carried him back inside with surprising strength. Nurses swarmed, alarms rang, and Rex refused to leave Jack's side until a doctor gently guided him away. When Jack awoke, Sarah stood beside him, arms crossed, her eyes fierce with frustration. "No more heroics out there," she scolded. Jack managed a small laugh. "I thought I retired from heroics years ago." "Not in this hospital," she replied, softening as she tucked his blanket securely around him. That moment marked a shift. Jack understood that survival required surrender, accepting help, accepting care, accepting that he mattered. Warmer days arrived as winter released its grip on Montana. Snow melted into streams, grass poked through thawing earth, and sunlight returned like a promise. Jack grew a bit stronger, enough that Dr. Carter scheduled the necessary operation. The morning of surgery, Michael held Jack's hand, gripping so tightly it hurt. The years weighed between them, memories of victories and losses unspoken but felt. "You saved the world in your own way," Michael said, his usually stern voice unsteady. Through a window in the operating room door, Jack saw Rex sitting obediently, his amber eyes locked on Jack's, ears forward, silently commanding him to fight. The procedure lasted hours. Michael paced the waiting room, Rex lying tense at his feet, head on his paws, but eyes never closing. Finally, Dr. Carter emerged, mask lowered, exhaustion etched into his features. "The surgery went well," he announced. Michael nearly collapsed from relief, dropping to his knees to wrap his arms around Rex as the dog barked victoriously. Jack survived the operation. When he awoke, the first thing he saw was Rex's eager face pressed against the glass, tail swaying slowly with careful joy. Jack raised a trembling hand and smiled. For the first time in months, he dared to believe that hope was not a foolish dream. Spring filled the air outside his window, and he let himself imagine stepping into a season where life bloomed again. Spring sunlight rested softly across the mountains of Montana, like a gentle blessing as Jack Turner returned home. His body had survived the operation, although every breath reminded him how fragile life had become. His strong shoulders had narrowed, his once steady hands now trembled with exhaustion, and his voice, though warm, carried the tired rasp of a man who had given everything he had. Yet his eyes still shone with that familiar, stubborn spark, a quiet fire that no illness could dim. Michael Davis helped him step carefully into the cabin, his tall frame steadying Jack's weakened body as Rex, the loyal German shepherd with thick sable fur and vigilant amber eyes, pressed close to Jack's leg, guiding him like a guardian angel wrapped in fur. The cabin, warmed by the crackling fireplace, felt like a sanctuary where love and memories filled every corner. Dr. Marcus Carter stopped by shortly after Jack arrived. His confident posture and crisp white shirt under a charcoal gray jacket contrasted with his weary face, one that had spent too many nights fighting the impossible. He explained gently that although the surgery was successful, the cancer had spread long before they discovered it. Marcus's deep voice softened to a whisper, as if speaking too loudly might worsen the truth. Jack listened with surprising calm. He nodded slowly, turned to Rex, who rested his head on his knee, and said with a faint smile, "I still won." To Jack, winning meant leaving behind goodness, not merely surviving. Word traveled quickly that Jack was home. Soon, The cabin was filled with familiar faces. Emily Reyes, the young social worker with long, dark hair and warm brown eyes, arrived first. Bringing homemade soup and a blanket, she crocheted herself in soft, forest green yarn. Daniel Harris followed, lanky and gentle, carrying a notebook filled with messages from students who wanted Jack to know they believed in heroes because of him. Marcus returned with medical supplies and stayed quietly in the background, watching with a protective gaze. Nurse Sarah Whitmore visited in the evenings, her auburn hair catching the firelight as she checked Jack's vitals, her calm presence soothing everyone in the room. Linda Brooks brought fresh-baked bread, her daughter hugging Jack tightly before shyly sitting by Rex to stroke his fur. Ben Carter, the young soldier with broad shoulders and determined eyes, stood near the door like a silent sentinel. And Harold Jenkins, the retired firefighter with a white mustache and steady hands, delivered more firewood than Jack could ever use. All these lives, all these grateful hearts, surrounded Jack like a circle of light. Laughter mixed with tears as they shared stories. How Jack slipped money into charity envelopes when he thought no one saw. How he stayed late after meetings to ask if someone needed a ride home. How he always remembered birthdays even when people forgot his. Each memory was proof that heroism had never required applause. As night returned, Michael spread a heavy quilt across Jack's legs. Jack asked for dimmed lights so that only the fireplace glowed. Rex climbed gently onto the rug beside him, curling close enough for Jack to feel his warmth. Jack rested his hand on Rex's head, his fingers sifting through the thick fur as he breathed in the scent of pine wood and home. A peaceful silence embraced the room. One by one, the visitors stepped back, letting the quiet become sacred. Michael sat beside his best friend, his rough hand holding Jack's gently. Jack looked at every face with love, pride, and the humble surprise of a man who never expected anything in return. Then he looked at Rex, whispering, "You take care of them now." A soft smile crept onto his lips, calm and satisfied. His chest rose with one final breath, and then Jack drifted into sleep, peaceful as the first day of spring. His hand remained resting on Rex's head as though still offering comfort. The funeral took place under a blooming sky where wildflowers dotted the thawed earth. Rex sat beside the grave with unwavering loyalty, chest high, ears alert, never once leaving his master. The American flag folded neatly on the casket reminded everyone that Jack had served his country, not just in war, but every day afterward as he fought for children's futures. Emily, Daniel, Marcus, and many others stood together, united by gratitude. In honor of Jack's life, they announced the creation of the Jack Turner Foundation, a charity dedicated to helping underprivileged children pursue education and safety, just as Jack had always done quietly. Jack Turner's story did not end in that cemetery. It lived on in every heart he healed, every future he changed, and every smile he had inspired. In that sense, his final smile was not truly the last. It would continue for generations. In a world where troubles often feel heavier than hope, Jack Turner proved that miracles do not always arrive with thunder and lightning. Sometimes, God sends them quietly through ordinary people with extraordinary kindness. Every meal shared, every child given a chance, every act of love in secret is a miracle in someone else's life. Jack never sought glory, yet God used him as a soldier of compassion. His story reminds us that when we give, we reflect God's heart. When we love, we become His hands. And when we stand by one another, we witness the true power of faith. If you believe that God still works through everyday heroes like Jack, please share this story to spread hope. Leave a comment with Amen if you feel touched, and subscribe to our channel for more stories that restore faith and remind us that angels sometimes walk among us. May the Lord bless, guide, and protect everyone watching. In His grace, miracles live on.